I'm standing in front of a wall in southern Pennsylvania. The stones are uneven. The mortar between them is cream-colored, soft to the touch, and slightly chalky on my fingers when I rub it. The barn this wall belongs to was built in 1853. It has never been repointed. Not once. The Amish family that owns it has records going back 4 generations. No major repairs, no structural failures. No cement crew has ever set foot on the property. Now look across the road. The county built a concrete retaining wall there in 1998. 28 years old. It is already cracking. Spalling along the top. Rebar showing through in 3 places. The county budgeted $400,000 to demolish and replace it next year. And that is not the strangest part of what I learned. The strangest part is this. The mortar in that 1853 Amish barn is closer in chemistry to the concrete that built the Roman Pantheon in 128 AD than it is to anything you can buy at a hardware store today. The Pantheon dome is 43.3 meters across, largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, almost 1,900 years old. No rebar, no steel, no maintenance. Still holding. And the formula that built it costs about $1 in raw materials per square foot to mix today. I want to tell you what happened to that formula, because it did not disappear by accident. Let me give you the math first, because the math is what made me stop sleeping. The average American home uses concrete in the foundation, the driveway, the walkway, the retaining walls, and often the basement floor. Modern reinforced concrete has a designed service life of 50 to 100 years. Most pours fail closer to 50. Driveways crack within 15. Foundations need patching by 40. Over the lifetime of a typical home, a homeowner spends between $28,000 and $72,000 on concrete repair, replacement, and resurfacing. That is just one house. Now scale up. The global cement industry produced 1.6 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2023. That is about 8% of all human emissions on Earth. More than aviation, more than shipping. The Portland Cement Association, which represents 92% of U.S. cement production capacity, reported $23.2 million in revenue in 2026, and lobbied Congress on building codes, EPA rules, and federal procurement standards in every single quarter of that year. Here's the question I could not stop asking. What if the most durable building material humans ever invented was perfected 2,000 years ago, preserved by farming communities for centuries, and the only reason you have never used it is because someone else profits from your foundation cracking? Stay with me. I'm going to walk you through the formula, layer by layer. Every claim has a source. Every number is real. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what was done to bury this knowledge. On number 1, the 3 ingredients. Roman concrete is not complicated. It is lime, volcanic ash, and water. That is it. The lime comes from limestone burned at 1650 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit until it transforms into calcium oxide, what masons call quicklime. The volcanic ash, called pozzolana, takes its name from the town of Pozzuoli on the Bay of Naples where the Romans first dug it. Mix them with water. That is the entire recipe. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote down the proportions around 25 BC in a book called 10 Books on Architecture. 1 part lime to 3 parts pozzolana for above-ground structures. 1 part lime to 2 parts pozzolana for anything that touches water. That ratio has not changed in 2,050 years. It is essentially the same formula that engineers use today for marine concrete. 2,000 years and we have not improved on it. But that is only half the story. On number 2, the hot mixing technique. For most of modern history, scholars assumed the Romans mixed the lime with water first, creating a paste, and then added the volcanic ash. This is called slaking. It is the slow, safe, predictable method. In 2023, a team led by Professor Admir Masich at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology published a paper in the journal Science Advances. They had been studying samples of Roman concrete from Privernum, 43 kilometers north of Pompeii, under scanning electron microscopes. They found something that overturned everything. The Romans were not slaking the lime. They were combining the dry quicklime directly with the volcanic ash and then adding water. The reaction was violently exothermic. It hit temperatures so high it created a different chemistry entirely. Masich called it hot mixing. 2,000 years before MIT named it, a Pompeii construction site that was preserved by the Vesuvius eruption in 79 AD had already been doing it. They confirmed it again in a Nature Communications paper in 2025. The Romans knew. We forgot. On number 3, the self-healing mechanism. This is where it gets impossible to dismiss. When you hot mix Roman concrete, you create tiny white nodules of unreacted quicklime scattered throughout the matrix. For decades, modern researchers looked at those white chunks and thought they were evidence of sloppy mixing. Masich and his team gave them a name, lime clasts, and they figured out what they actually do. When a crack forms in the concrete, water seeps in. The water hits a lime clast. The clast dissolves into a calcium-saturated solution. The solution flows into the crack, and it recrystallizes as calcium carbonate, sealing the crack from the inside. The MIT team manufactured Roman-style concrete in their lab, deliberately cracked it, and ran water through the cracks. Within 2 weeks, the cracks were completely healed. Water could no longer flow through. They ran the same experiment on modern Portland cement concrete. The cracks never healed. Never. The Roman material is alive in a way ours is not. It treats damage the way a tree treats a wound. Modern concrete treats damage the way a teacup treats a hammer. Now, here is where most people stop. They hear about lime clasts and self-healing and think it is interesting trivia. It is not trivia. It is the difference between a foundation that lasts your great-great-grandchild's lifetime and one that you will repair twice before you die. On number 4, the seawater paradox. Modern concrete dissolves in salt water. Coastal homeowners know this. Roman concrete does the opposite. It gets stronger. The harbor at Caesarea Maritima, on the coast of modern-day Israel, was built around 25 BC. Roman engineers poured concrete piers directly into the Mediterranean Sea. Those piers are still there. 2,050 years of waves, salt, and storms. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley studied core samples from those piers in 2013. They found that the seawater was not destroying the concrete. It was reacting with the pozzolana to grow new mineral crystals inside the matrix. A rare aluminum-based mineral called aluminum tobermerite. The longer the concrete sat in the salt water, the more crystals grew, and the stronger the concrete became. Pliny the Elder, writing in 79 AD before he died in the Vesuvius eruption, said the Roman cement was, quote, impregnable to the waves. He was not exaggerating. He was describing the chemistry. On number 5, the cross-civilizational record. This is the part that makes the suppression argument impossible to ignore. Pozzolanic lime cement was not a Roman invention. The Greeks were using it on Santorini before the Romans. The Persians were using volcanic ash and lime in their reservoirs, the famous Ab Anbars, by the 7th century. The Mayans of Mesoamerica developed an independent version, using volcanic ash and crushed shells before contact with Europe. Korean masons used a related limestone and clay technique in temple foundations, going back to the Goryeo period. The Egyptians used lime mortars dating back 12,000 years. Archaeologists have identified the oldest known purpose-built lime kiln in the Hayonim Cave in Galilee, dating to 10,000 BC. 12,000 years of lime mortar. Across continents that had never spoken to each other, all arriving at the same answer. Burn limestone, mix with reactive ash, add water, build something that outlasts empires. The Amish and the Mennonite communities of Pennsylvania did not invent any of this. They preserved it. When German and Swiss masons brought their craft to Lancaster County in the 1700s, they brought the lime kilns with them. 14 years ago, a researcher named Jonathan in Lancaster founded a company called Lancaster Lime Works after 40 years of testing historic mortars in the field. He has documented Amish farms where the original lime mortar from the 1830s is still functioning, still flexible, still breathing with the seasons. The last working Amish lime kiln in Lancaster County did not stop firing until 1971. Some of the older Amish farmers refused to switch to commercial Portland cement because they said, in their words, the burned lime was better. They were right. They were just not loud about it. But that is only half the story, because once you know what we lost, the next question is how we lost it. And the timeline is very precise. On number 6, the suppression. Here is what happened. On October 21st, 1824, an English bricklayer named Joseph Aspdin patented British patent number 5022. He called his invention Portland cement because the hardened product looked like the limestone quarried on the Isle of Portland in Dorset. Aspdin's powder was something genuinely new. You could ship it in barrels. You could pour it on demand. It set in hours instead of weeks. It did not require the patient slaking and waiting that lime mortar required. For builders racing to put up factories during the Industrial Revolution, it was a miracle. For the limebrenners and stonemasons, whose families had practiced their craft for 30 generations, it was the end. Here is what most people miss. Portland cement did not displace lime mortar because it was better. It displaced lime mortar because it was faster, cheaper to mass produce, and most importantly, it could be patented and standardized into a brand. You cannot patent a ratio. You cannot patent a mix of dirt and water that any farmer can make in his back field. But you can patent a kiln process. You can build a factory. You can sell barrels. In 1902, a group of cement manufacturers in the eastern United States formed a trade association in New York. By 1924, that association, today known as the Portland Cement Association, had become one of the most effective industry lobbies in American construction history. They funded research at Lewis Institute. They wrote standards. In 1916, the American Society for Testing and Materials published ASTM C9, the first national specification for Portland cement, written largely with input from the cement industry itself. Through the 1920s, state by state, building codes were rewritten to specify compliance with that standard. And here is the quiet part. Lime mortar formulas were not banned. They were simply omitted from the codes. If a material was not in the code, it could not be specified by an architect, approved by an inspector, or insured by a lender. By 1924, on the centennial of Aspdin's patent, lime mortar had been functionally erased from the legal definition of acceptable American construction. Not by prohibition, by omission. This is the pattern you will see again and again. It was not banned. It was made irrelevant by requirement. The Portland Cement Association, in 2023, reported that they continue to advocate for what they call, in their own published documents, addressing policies and building codes that make the transition tougher for the industry. They mean tougher on emissions reform. But the same machinery that protects them from carbon rules is the machinery that wrote lime mortar out of the codes 100 years ago. That is not a conspiracy. That is just a market that rewards complexity and punishes simplicity. I will let you draw your own conclusions. If you already own a house, and you are thinking that this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me. This next part is specifically for you. On number 7, the retrofit. You do not need to demolish anything. You do not need permits. You do not need contractors. You need 3 things. Hydrated lime, which costs about $15 for a 50-pound bag at any agricultural supply store. Sand, which is cheap or free. And a pozzolan, either a small bag of metakaolin clay for about $30, or, even better, coal fly ash, which the cement industry itself uses as a substitute, and which can be purchased for about 8 cents per pound in bulk. That is your basic Roman-style mortar. Total material cost to mix a 5-gallon bucket of lime mortar good enough to repoint an entire stone foundation. Roughly $11. The same job done by a contractor with Portland cement runs between $2,000 and $4,000. The materials cost $1 a square foot. The labor is your weekend. For homeowners with cracked basement walls, the technique is called repointing. You rake out the failing modern mortar to a depth of about 3/4 of an inch. You pre-wet the joint with water. You pack in the lime mortar with a tuck pointer. You let it cure slowly for at least 3 to 4 weeks, misting it lightly. That is the entire process. A man in Lancaster County did this on his 1840s stone farmhouse foundation. He had been quoted $19,000 by a local masonry contractor to seal what they called catastrophic mortar failure. He spent $240 on materials and 3 weekends in the spring of 2022. He sent me photographs last fall. The mortar is curing harder every season. He has not touched it since. He did not remove anything. He did not pour new concrete. He just put the right material back where the wrong material had been. For new construction, even simpler. The recipe Lancaster Limeworks publishes openly is 1 part natural hydraulic lime to 2.5 parts sharp sand. For pozzolanic strength, add 15% metakaolin or fly ash by binder weight. Mix dry, add water slowly. The mortar will heat in your hands. That heat is the same hot mixing reaction the Romans used at Pompeii. You are doing what they did. The physics has not changed. Now stay with me, because the last technique I am going to share is something I've never seen written down in any modern construction guide. It comes from a single source, and once you understand it, the cost to durability ratio becomes almost absurd. On number 8, the buried secret. Here is the detail that changes everything. In their 2023 Science Advances paper, Masick and his team noted something almost in passing. The Roman limeclasts only form their crack-healing nanostructure if the quicklime is added dry, before the water is introduced. If you slake the lime first, the way every modern lime mortar guide tells you to, the clasts never form. The mortar is still good, but the self-healing capacity is gone. This means the difference between a mortar that lasts a century and a mortar that lasts 2,000 years is the order in which you add the ingredients. That is it. Quicklime first, pozzolan second, water last. Mix dry first, hydrate after. The Pompeii construction site, preserved by Vesuvius, confirmed this in detail. The Roman masons kept their dry components separate. They mixed the lime and the volcanic ash on a wooden board. Then they added water at the moment of placement, working fast as the mortar steamed in their hands. A bag of agricultural quicklime, which is calcium oxide, costs about $22 for 50 pounds. That is enough to repoint roughly 40 linear feet of stone foundation. The trick is not the formula. The trick is the timing, and the timing was never written into the modern instructional manuals, because by the time those manuals were written, the cement industry had already replaced the lime kilns. The knowledge survived in 2 places: in the academic study of Roman ruins, and in the oral tradition of Amish and Mennonite masons, who never stopped mixing it the old way. I have been sitting with that for a long time. The difference between an investment that outlives your grandchildren and one that fails before your mortgage is paid off is the order in which you combine 3 ingredients that cost a total of about $1 per square foot. That is not a metaphor. That is a literal description of the chemistry. After my last video on traditional building methods, hundreds of you asked where to find these formulas in one place. I put together a complete written guide with the exact ratios, the cure times, the regional pozzolana substitutes, and the historic mix records I have been able to verify. The link is in the description. One sentence on it. Moving on. So here is where we are. You and I now share something that an industry generating 1.6 billion tons of carbon and billions of dollars in annual revenue depends on most people not knowing. Roman concrete lasts 2,000 years. Modern reinforced concrete lasts 50. The difference is a ratio that a Roman architect wrote down before the birth of Christ, a mixing technique that MIT confirmed in 2023, and an order of operations that an Amish lime burner in Lancaster County kept alive until 1971. The materials cost about $1 per square foot. The contractors charge you $40. I want a comment from you. Find the oldest stone or brick building still standing in your county. Drop the year it was built and the county name in the comments. I want to map every pre-cement structure still in use in America, because every one of those buildings is evidence that we built better when we built simpler. If your grandparents or great-grandparents had a stone foundation, a root cellar, a spring house, I want to hear about it. Tell me how old it is. Tell me if it has ever been repaired. Next week, I'm going to show you the Amish water collection system that the Environmental Protection Agency tried to classify as non-compliant in 2012. They failed. And the reason they failed is a story that involves a Pennsylvania Dutch farmer, a federal regulator, and a stone-lined cistern that has not been emptied in 170 years. You will want to be subscribed before that one drops. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. The math is simple. $40,000 over 30 years, or $11 and a weekend. They are not even close.